Everybody, welcome Midweek Live. I've got Chuck here with me again. Yeah, we're repeating. No, I'm just kidding. It's not the same conversation. Chuck, you are a family and marriage therapist. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
I love how you were. I love
family
marriage and family. Oh, see, I flopped them. Yeah, I'm not surprised that I would do that. And so we talked about a month ago. I was looking at it. It was the early part of March, and had some great conversations about just kind of, is counseling good for you, and what has it looked like during COVID season, and all of that. And we started to hit some things. In fact, we got some questions live during that time that we're going to hit today that I think are really good. And then we're also in a series called Big Questions on Sunday right now. People have been submitting questions, and so some of those aligned with that's some of the things we're going to talk about today, so I thought it would be good to bring those in. And so let's just kick it off, because this was one of the questions that came in online, and the question was basically, are chemical imbalances real? Should we be taking, is medication like approved? And can you be healed from them? Was really the three-part question there.
So it's yes, yes, and yes.
The easy answer is.
So yeah, our bodies can certainly have chemical imbalances, right? And so part of the second question is they're approved. If they're approved by the FDA, yes. Are they approved biblically, if that's the question? I think so, right? I think that God has given us a brain to think. He's given us all the herbs and all the resources of the earth to be able to look at. And I think that for appropriate reasons, we could utilize medication, right? As a way of finding balance in our body, right? And so is that healing? Yeah, I think so, right? It's certainly treatment. And sometimes I may need to take a medication for the rest of my life, right? You know, if I have
That's very true.
You know, if I have cancer, if I have diabetes, if I have some other issue, I may need to have medication to support my body's way of protecting itself and keeping itself alive, right? So to kind of think back a little bit too, if it's appropriate. So if we're thinking of chemical imbalances, often we're talking about depression or anxiety and that sort of thing, something that's happening in our brain. And so the first thing I always tell people is get a good physical, right? Because sometimes it's an imbalance, but it's the depression's coming from something that our body's doing physically or not doing physically, right? And so it can be, you know, a gut problem. So serotonin comes from the gut. It could be, you know, a thyroid issue that our body's just not producing the chemicals that we need to maintain kind of a happy state, so to speak, right?
like a balance.
And the other part is just to know that sometimes life isn't happy, right? And just because I'm a Christian doesn't mean that life is going to be great and wonderful and perfect, and that I'm not always going to be happy, right?
That's a great point.
And there's you know, there's nuances to that, right? So you know, it's kind of hard to answer that fully without kind of knowing a specific space too for that particular person. There are times where I say that medication isn't appropriate because it's not about things that have happened or occurred to me, and sometimes it's things that haven't happened to us, right? If we haven't been nurtured or cared for well,
that's a good point.
I can be anxious and feel unsafe, right? Or I can be sad and depressed because of the events that have occurred to me, or things that haven't happened to me, right? But if I'm sinning, right? If I'm doing something that creates this disconnect within me, right? This incongruent part of my behavior and what I believe spiritually in who I am. Well, maybe I'm depressed and maybe I'm anxious and I'm worried I'm going to get caught and I'm worried about this and I'm feeling this. And so I take medication and it regulates my body, but it's allowing me to continue sinning. Well, the remedy there is to repent, right? And to ask for forgiveness and to seek accountability and to shift so that my behavior and my spirit are congruent with one another, right? My true self, how I should be living and want to live before God, right, is aligned. And that's the remedy for that. Right. So, yeah, I think medication is okay. I think we're probably a nation that's over medicated, right? and sometimes that's the fast way out, but sometimes that's the way out, right? And
Right.
sometimes we need to do something that's a little faster.
Right.
And oftentimes medication offers us an opportunity, a window of opportunity
Yeah.
to see it differently, right? So it reduces my depression and it allows me to come into a different place of
A
thinking.
little more clear-minded.
Right? It reduces my anxiety, allows me to come into a different place of thinking. And as I think and build skills and ground myself, root myself
Right.
in truth, sometimes those symptoms can kind of go away.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, it's like a healing that can happen.
Correct.
Yeah. A healing of the mind as you kind of are able to.
Well, and part of it is again, I've said that we're social beings, right?
Right.
But there's a physical and there's an emotional and there's a spiritual component to that.
Right.
And all of those are tied together.
Right.
Right. And so if I'm unbalanced physically, maybe emotionally and maybe socially,
Right.
relationally, I'm unbalanced.
Right.
If I'm unbalanced spiritually, that's going to impact those places. So when I find
Right.
those places of balance, I live better, right?
Right.
They all support one another, or they can all kind of not support each other.
They can work against each other, is
Right.
what you're saying ultimately.
Right.
They can all be in harmony or playing different songs.
Right.
Okay. So let's move from the question of chemical imbalance to just like depression and anxiety, because we're kind of talking about that a little bit right now. Let's say I'm a parent and I feel like something's not right. What are some of the like tall tale signs of depression or anxiety in kids and teens? I know those are probably two different scenarios here.
Well, yeah. It could be isolation. It could be irritability. It certainly may be a change in mood, a change in behavior. Things that I used to like to do, I'm kind of not doing anymore.
Okay.
Those types of things would be signs that something's shifting.
Right.
And part of it is it's nice to know that somebody noticed, right? Hey, so I noticed
Good
that
point.
you used to like playing baseball, and Johnny came by and asked if you wanted to go, and you didn't go. I'm wondering what's up.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just not into baseball anymore, Mom. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't feel like it, right? So a little bit different, right? And part of it is how attuned are we to our kids, right?
Yeah.
So this answer, well, I just didn't want to.
Right.
Might be a cover up.
Right.
But maybe that's just the truth that, yeah, I used to be into baseball and now I'm not.
Right.
And this other one is just that, yeah, my mood, I'm not really sure, right? And so to be able to wonder about that, right? But if a
Right.
parent's noticing, then that's attunement.
Right.
Right. And so how do you then connect to them? How do you come alongside them
Yeah.
in those places? Right. And so, it could be sleep patterns, and it could even be what they talk about or how they care for themselves. Obviously, older kids are caring differently than younger kids,
Right.
hygiene-wise and
Right.
things of that nature. So,
Right.
so just being aware of those, I
Yeah.
guess.
Is it kind of taking a tally of it all
Yeah.
ultimately? Kind of taking, it's
Right.
not just this one isolated interaction with them, but there's just
Right.
kind of this.
But you want to notice some of those
Right.
things and kind of go, oh, so that was interesting that this happened, or this didn't happen, that they stopped doing
Right.
that, or they started doing this, or gosh, a shift in the music that they're listening to, or even friends that they're hanging out with.
Yeah.
Those could be other things, that tell you something about where they might be. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's more on the depression side. And on the anxiety side, do those look very similar?
Well, they can.
Okay.
Right. I mean, so maybe I just decide I don't want to go out anymore because I'm worried that something might happen.
Yeah.
Or I'm worried that something will happen to you or something
Yeah.
at the house, so I don't want to leave because, right? So again, depending on the type of anxiety, there's lots of different ways that we can label anxiety, right?
Yeah.
There's a generalized anxiety that's just I'm worried in general.
Right.
Then there's kind of a specific anxiety that I'm worried about this one particular thing.
Right.
So I just can't be at a public pool, or I can't be in in a crowded bus or something like that, right? And so again, kind of just noticing what are those things, and then there's a panic disorder where
Right.
I might have had an anxiety attack, right?
Right.
And I have this physical thing that happens to my body.
Yes.
And then what happens is I have the fear that I'm going to have another attack.
Yes.
So I'm not really afraid of something out here, but I'm afraid that, oh my gosh, that's going to happen again. I'm going to be embarrassed, or
Right.
people aren't going to know what to do, or I'm whatever, right?
Yeah.
So now I have this worry that it's going to happen, and that kind of stays in the background.
Yes.
But again, so those are all kind of those places, all the way to kind of this, obsessive kind of way of thinking or behaving,
Yeah.
because that's still kind of this anxious thing. If I don't do this, then this is going to happen. So
Right.
I think we talked about this last time, right? But so
Yeah.
I turn the lights off and on 3 times before I go to bed,
Right.
just because I need to, or I check and double check something,
Right.
or triple or 10
Right.
times check
Right.
it,
Or
right?
there's a certain amount it's
Right.
supposed to hit in your head
Right.
that you think that you need to do.
And so again, those are all kind of treatable,
Right.
with what we call CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay.
And sometimes we need medication for some of those,
Okay.
right? To kind of manage that balance. And so I always kind of start with ways of thinking and shifting, and things that I can kind of maybe even do and control in my body to see if we can shift that thing from happening, right?
Right.
Before we go into medication.
Right.
And again, a good physical to make sure that there's nothing else happening,
Yeah.
in our body before we kind of move
Yeah.
to
So you
to
would actually,
medication.
that's exactly what I was going to ask. Would you suggest seeing your physician first for a physical before maybe, is it counseling that needs to be done? Is it, what's the like, what would be a next appropriate step as a parent?
Well, so maybe counseling first.
Yeah.
Right. But a physician would be too. It's like, hey, I've noticed these things.
Right.
Most physicians kind of have a checklist for ADD and depression
Right.
and anxiety.
Right.
And they can go, okay, and they can do some blood work, and they can
Right.
do some other things to check to see where levels are. Right.
Right.
So vitamin D is a big deal.
Yes.
If that's low, we can get anxiety. You know,
Yes.
there's other things that can contribute to anxiety. Again, our gut health can contribute to our anxiety, right?
Right.
And so part of it is there's tests that I can't do,
Right.
That can tell us, no, everything looks good physically. Okay,
Right.
so if it's all good physically, then maybe we can try some of these
Right.
these skills and these
Right.
other kinds of things that we can begin to shift how I'm thinking.
Right.
Oftentimes there's fears behind those things, right?
Yes.
There's this way that I'm wondering about who I am and what I am, right?
Right.
And how I fit in and that sort of thing. And so sometimes it's we can shift just the thinking and move it from lies that we've agreed with about ourselves and
Yeah.
about others,
Yeah.
and move it to the truth of who we
Yeah.
are, right?
Yeah. That's great. So really, I'm hearing ultimate first step for a parent is just make a step. Make an appointment with the
Well, and even just
physician.
talking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just even being able to have a conversation with
conversation.
your child, right?
Yeah.
To say, gosh, I've noticed this,
Yeah.
and oh, don't worry about, well, I kind of am,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And just kind of putting it out there, but again, it's a way of giving permission to it, right?
Right.
Oh, okay, so I'm not out here by myself. People do notice and see me if that's part of the fear, if that's part of the
Yeah,
lie that
that's a
I'm
great
wondering
point.
about, right?
Yeah.
And so even that is a first step. And then it's like, well, how is it impacting, right?
Yeah.
No, this is more than just a weekend thing or
Right.
a breakup thing or a I didn't make the team thing,
Right.
right? And so I'm thinking that maybe we should do something else, right? And what would be that next step, right? Sometimes it's a contact with a pastor, and oftentimes that's a first step for a lot of families,
Yeah.
right? Is their spiritual leader to come
Yeah.
and just talk about, hey, this has been happening, kind of a
Right.
thing. But yeah, wondering with the doctor.
Yeah.
We've been noticing these things, right?
Yeah.
And what do you think? And should we, what kind of test can we
Right.
do? Where should we go with
Yeah.
that? The other part would be to maybe get an assessment. I've had a couple of students come in like that, right?
Yeah.
Parents are concerned, and some of them it's like, oh yeah, we should probably,
Yeah.
have you guys keep coming in. I've had a couple where it's like, yeah, what they're telling me, and again, I'm only getting what they tell me, right? But it's
Right.
like, from what they're saying, I don't see that ongoing therapy is indicated, right?
Right.
But here are some things that you can continue to do, and
Right.
nice job kind of noticing that
Right.
and that sort of thing, right?
Right, right. Okay, so let's change gears and talk about harming yourself. So as a parent of a child or a teen, if they are harming themselves or they know let's start off with them harming themselves. You know that it's happening, you're noticing it, you're seeing scars or you're seeing marks. What would you say to that parent? Like, what's the...
Well, so part of it is, what's the harm, right? Am I punching myself when I'm angry? Am I cutting on myself? Those kinds of things. So cutting is a suicidal gesture.
Okay.
Right? And maybe it's an attempt. So it's something that we always take seriously.
Yeah.
A lot of times people who cut are not wanting to die.
Right.
But it's a physical way of controlling pain when they feel out of control emotionally, right? When they can't control the emotional pain, they can control something physically. And so cutting is almost like a soothing technique. But it's a big indicator that you need to put some attention there, right?
Yes.
And so not like, oh, you got to, but it is almost that.
Right.
Right? It's like, okay, so we have to take a step, and actually maybe a few steps.
Right.
Here.
Right. Right.
And not because it's bad behavior, but because it's a loving act to care for and tend to the need that they have.
Yeah.
Right? And so here's a person, whoever they are, could even be an adult, saying, I don't know what to do with my pain. Somebody please come see. Somebody please notice me, right?
Right.
And so I've had parents say, oh, well, they're just doing that for attention. I'm like, well, give it to them.
Yeah.
Right? If you know that that's what they're doing, we need to give them the attention.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm not going to let them control me. It's like, well, it's not even about that,
Yeah.
right? They're saying, I don't feel heard. I don't feel seen. I don't feel like I belong. I don't feel something. And would you please let me know that actually I am lovable, right? That I am enough, that I have what it takes, that I can be whatever, right?
Right.
And so how do we do that?
Yeah.
Right? As Christian parents.
Yeah.
Right? Love our kids in a way that they would feel loved, right? And loved by us and loved by God.
Right.
Well, you got to figure it out on your own. Or it's like, no, right?
But it's not just saying I love you, am I right? I mean, it's not just the words, but it's also the action of some things that you can do as a parent would be.
Well, again, responding to it. Going, wow, that's
Yeah.
that's a really big thing. So you got my attention. What do I need to
Yes.
know? Right? Here I am. I'm behind you.
Yeah.
Right? Harming yourself
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to me, and I don't want you to hurt yourself any more than you have. But what do you need? How can I help? What is it in this moment? In that moment particularly, but here's the things that I'm going to do, right? Because I want to know that you're safe.
Right.
You're important to me.
Yeah.
Right? And so part of it is that that initial response.
Yeah.
Right? And then a continued response.
Right.
Into that, right?
What would be a don't, though?
Criticizing, blowing it off, right? It's like, oh, there you go, here, you need a better knife, right, or whatever. Right?
Mocking or
and it's like, oh, sure, you're the only one that ever had, right?
Yeah.
It's just this misunderstanding of what they're saying.
Yeah.
Yes, they're asking for attention.
Yeah.
Right, and so it's like, why not give it to them, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not costing you anything besides your time,
right,
and your love, which we would strongly assume that you love your kids.
And so, shaming them, right? Oh, that God doesn't want you doing that. And well, yeah, He doesn't. But how do you bring them to a place to even want to care what God thinks, right? Because sometimes, unfortunately, I've seen where Christian families aren't very Christian. Right?
Yeah.
We have these thoughts and these things that we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And we just need to hit the markers, but there's no, you said not just loving, but putting action behind it.
Right.
And so it's like, yeah, we do all this stuff and we go and we say all these things, but we live differently. Right? And so there are students that don't really care what God thinks. And in fact, because their parents are Christians, right? Go to church and tell them all this religious stuff, have chosen not to, right? It's an insult to them to talk about spiritual things. And so part of it is, sometimes being a parent is knowing who we are, not necessarily knowing what to do, right?
Wait, let's say that again. Being a parent is sometimes knowing who you are as opposed to what you do.
Knowing
what you do.
So sometimes we think, I just need to know what to do. I just need to know what to do. And part of it is who am I? as a loving father, as a loving husband, as a loving friend, as a loving person, as a Christian man, who am I and what does that mean to somebody who would cut themselves or harm themselves or curse God? Who am I and how would I love that person? Right?
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, just give me a handbook of what to do and how to interact.
Right.
I have to know who I am.
That's great.
And a lot of times we don't.
Yeah.
Right? We just don't know that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Well, so again, what are my values? What's important to me? How do I live that out? You know, if I say, oh, well, I'm loving and forgiving. Well, how am I loving and forgiving with my wife? How am I loving and forgiving with my friends? How am I loving and forgiving with my kids?
Right.
Across all the different
Right.
places. If that's me,
Right.
how do I do that?
Right.
How do
Am I
live that
actually
out?
showing,
Right.
instead of saying that's what I am, would other people say that's what I am?
Yeah. Right.
Because that's actually the fruit, right?
Well, and sometimes it is who I am, but I haven't matured into it yet. Right? So
That's a good
I give
point.
an example a lot of times to say, if I had an apple seed, what would this apple seed need to become an apple tree?
Right.
What does it need?
Right. Well, you need to plant it,
Okay?
give it water, give it
Okay.
sun.
And it's a trick question in a way because I say, no, everything that apple seed needs to be an apple tree, it already has. Right? The soil, the sun, the water, our life experiences, they certainly help and contribute to its ability to grow. But when we are knit together by God, when we're created by God, and we're birthed into this earth, everything that God has in his purpose for us is there already.
Wow.
Now, some of us don't get the soil, or we get the soil, but we don't get the water.
Right.
Right? And so these relationships and these external things that help us grow,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes they're there. And part of it is oh, well, you know, I don't know. Nobody ever loved me, so I don't know how to love. Well, if that's a thing that comes out of your heart and pops into your mind when you think of who am I really, then that's a thing that maybe, you know, if I go to Costco and buy that little sprig of a tree and I bring it back a week later and say, well, this is a dumb apple tree. It didn't give me any apples. And the guy says, well, you've only had it a
Yeah.
week.
You got to give it more time.
And so, oh, no, I
Yeah.
plant it. I know that in a year, maybe 2 years, it's going to
Yeah.
maybe produce fruit.
Right.
Right? And sometimes there are parts of us that haven't developed, we haven't cultivated
Right.
our life so that part grows.
Wow.
But it is part of us.
Right.
So sometimes, yeah, it's not, right? And I think it's more, sometimes I go, oh, well, I want to be a Granny Smith apple, or I want to be, you know, a Fuji apple. And I have to go, no, you know what? I'm just a Red Delicious. But I know who I am. And
Yeah.
because I'm a Red Delicious,
Yeah.
I'm just going to make good applesauce and good apple juice and a good
Right.
apple and a good
Right.
climbing tree. And I'm content with who I am because I know who I am.
That's great.
Right? I don't have to be fancy or be, you know, baked in a pie or whatever. But I know who I am because I'm growing and maturing in that space of my truth, right?
So ultimately, I'm hearing that if you as a parent haven't gotten to this place, right, where you
it
need to,
complicates
yeah,
it,
you
right?
need to actually know this before you know, like you need to actually be passing this on to your kids, right? And
Because
understanding and
but
knowledge.
part of it is when I know who I am, I know what I want to leave as a legacy. I know
Yeah.
what's important to me,
Yeah.
and then my partner, and then we can decide
Yeah.
who we are as a family,
Right.
and what are the things that we're
Right.
gonna leave, right?
Right.
And so how do we cultivate that
Yeah.
in our kids?
Yeah.
Right. So here's this seed, and how do we prepare the
Right.
ground, and how do we tend
Right.
to it, and how do we keep weeds
Yeah.
away, and how do we, you know, put the stick next to it and
Right.
and raise it
Yeah.
straight, right?
There's a lot of effort put into it. There's a lot of diligent, you know, you have
Right.
to keep, you know, you don't just water it one time, you water
Right.
it over and over again. You
Right.
know, you check on it, you prune it, you know, you do the things that need to be done
Absolutely.
to care for it. And so don't brush it off like
Right.
it's fine, it'll grow, whatever.
and sometimes that happens, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
God created us.
Right.
And so, you know, we have that cleanup day that comes around and you can dump all your trash out to the
Right,
front.
yes,
So we had taken down part of our fence one time and it was stacked in the side of the house. And our time came, so we're hauling all this stuff out. And as we pulled it away, there's this little fig tree,
Oh,
right? Got a my house is here, and
Yeah.
I got cement here,
Yeah.
and somehow there's a seed that got into some dirt and was able to kind of grow out of there.
Yeah.
And sometimes, even when nobody's tending to us, we are who we are because God created us, right? We find a way even to grow in those places. And now, if I would have planted that fig tree, intended to it,
Right.
and it would have had a much better
Experience.
beginning,
Yeah.
right? And so it was kind of this
Placement,
crooked
yeah.
little thing
Yeah.
that was kind of trying to come
Yeah.
up between the boards, and there was a few leaves on the top, and it was kind of
Yeah.
bare this way.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's the way we are,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But we're enough because God created us.
Yeah.
And that's part of that belief piece of, even if my family's dysfunctional and doesn't get it,
Right.
who am I ultimately, right?
Yeah.
Am I a creation of God?
Yeah.
And if I believe that, then there's some strength there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then I can wonder about the things that I didn't get, the
Yeah.
experiences that I didn't have. But
Yes.
but I can also learn to cultivate that. So if this is who I am, how do I plant myself deep into God, into the family of God? How do I prepare this land around me so that God can touch me and
Yeah.
grow me? And how do I bring friends into my life that are going to help me, grow
Yeah.
straight and those kinds of things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's not an easy task, especially when I'm on my own that way.
Yes.
But it's the truth,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so part of it is living out of truth,
Yeah.
right? As a man thinketh, so is he. Right? The Bible tells us that it doesn't say change your behavior. It says whatever's good, whatever's true is the first one,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Whatever's good, whatever's perfect, right? Think on these things. And it's a way of thinking. It's where my belief is, right? It's where my treasure is.
Yeah.
When I really begin to understand that piece, right?
Yeah.
When I really begin
Yeah.
to know who God is,
Right.
that shifts something big in me chemically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It shifts something big in me emotionally.
Yeah.
It shifts something big in me relationally,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And so, such an important piece.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
I'm kind of preaching, but I don't get to preach in my therapy
There you go.
room.
No,
So
that's good. Keep going.
one of the things that I think is I love music,
Yeah.
right? And I love worship music.
Yeah.
If we knew God, if we knew God in deep ways,
Yeah.
and we knew how to worship, and worship is not just that I sing good or that I count on the 2 and the 4.
Right.
So don't clap on the 1 and the 3.
Right. It's 2 and 4.
It's an important thing. But when I can say, it is well with my soul, because I've had a supernatural experience,
Yeah. Yeah.
when I can know that I am rescued, right? When I know that he is great and mighty and his wings cover me, that he loves me. It's this knowing
Yeah.
of God's love.
Yeah.
And part of knowing is I have to experience that with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I can worship. And as I worship, my goodness, things just melt away. And is God the answer to everything? Yes. Can people get there? No. People
Right.
struggle with that. People struggle with
Right.
believing that God is who he says he is, believing that they're
Right.
enough and that God's love covers their sin. Right? And so, in a lot of ways, therapy is trying to dispel these lies that we've agreed with and
Yeah.
finding the truth of who we are.
That's great.
Right?
Yeah.
And we do that in shape, right? Part of it
Right.
is, well, what's my spiritual gift?
Right.
What's my heart? And what's my
Right.
abilities and my
Yes.
personality and my experiences? And those are all parts of the truth of who I am.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so if we could understand truth, right? In Ephesians, the Bible says, so take on the full armor of God,
Right.
right? And what's the first thing he says? Gird yourself with the belt of truth. I love that. When I'm centered in truth, I live differently, right? And I can put God's word on truth, and I can tuck that breastplate in, and I can gird my loins into
Yeah.
that truth because I'm centered in truth.
Yeah.
When I believe these lies, I live a much more depressed, more anxious, more fearful kind of life, right? Now, this isn't a perfect life.
Right.
I can still doubt, and I can still have fears, and I can still struggle because life still brings pain.
Yeah.
But there's this truth that I can count on, right? That's beyond my ability sometimes. And sometimes it's within my ability. It's within my own strength.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's the truth of who I am. And part of who I am is how I'm connected to God, and part of who I am is how I'm connected to others.
Right.
And I can control those.
Right.
I can let God come and fill me, or I could block that. I
Right.
can love others, or I can block that. Right? And so, I don't know.
Yeah.
Truth is an important piece.
Yeah.
How we think
Yeah.
shifts. I mean, that's what CBT is shifting and looking at cognitive distortions.
Right.
What are things that you're believing that aren't really true, and
Right.
how did you get to that thing, and what's
Right.
really the truth, right?
How can we rewrite into truth?
And so that's great.
Yeah.
And there's a piece to that. But I always say there's that spiritual component. So what's
Yeah.
the truth about who we are spiritually?
Yeah.
What's the truth of who we are and why we exist here? What
Yeah.
is, our purpose, kind
Right.
of a thing, right? And that is deeply embedded to how we believe we came to be in the first place, right?
Yeah.
If we evolved, well, there's not a lot of purpose in that kind of way of thinking.
Yeah.
And so I might do lots of things because it's like, well, I'm not sure, I'm evolving.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But if I know that God loved me and that God knit me together,
Right.
then I can shift differently, and and then I have a trajectory that I can move towards and with.
So a lot of what you're saying is that ultimately parenting and just life in general boils down to really understanding how that God created you, not only for his purpose in worship and in your life here, but in your community, the circle of influence around you, including your family, your friends, and things like that. And that's really the overflowing, right? That's the overflowing of a life that is lived in, that's honoring God and putting yourself centered on him. How, as parents, do we disagree with our teenagers well? Because I'll raise my hand and say, I have disagreed with they're not teenagers anymore, but when they were teenagers, where it gets loud. It gets loud. Because you kind of feel like you're not listening. You're kind of at your wit's end. You had a great quiet time that morning, but in this moment, it's not so great.
Well, part of it is understanding, right? There's a difference between getting somebody to agree with me, or even agreeing with them and me understanding them. So just because I agree with my child, or if I agree with or understand them, right? If I understand my kid, if I understand my wife, it doesn't mean that I'm agreeing. And it doesn't mean that I'm confessing. Oh, you're right, I'm wrong. It means that I understand them, right? I come to that space of where they're at, and I go, my goodness, what a horrible feeling to think that your mom and dad don't care for you. Wow, that's interesting that you wonder about your sexuality, and you have that same sex attraction, right? And it's just an understanding of maybe how they got there. Not, oh my gosh, I can't believe you don't you know that, right?
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't draw them to you, right?
Yeah.
And maybe they never shift their mind.
Right.
But again, who am I
Yeah.
as a lover and a parent, right? How do I,
Yeah.
their behavior doesn't dictate what I do. I do. And when I know that, again, I'm understanding them doesn't mean that I'm condoning it. That doesn't mean that I'm agreeing with it. Doesn't mean that I'm confessing to it. It just means that I'm understanding them.
That you're validating them.
I'm loving them. Right? And I'm not even sure that it's validation in the sense that it's like, yes, that's the right feeling to have.
Right.
But it's just like, wow, I see how you got there.
Empathizing.
It's empathy, right?
Yeah,
and
because you're actually saying I understand where you're
well,
coming from.
I can feel that, right? And so empathy is this ability to understand and feel their feeling, but I'm not overwhelmed with it.
Right.
Sometimes their feeling is overwhelming to them, but I
Yes.
can go, oh wow,
Yeah.
what a horrible
Yeah.
thought.
Is that part of sharing
Right.
burdens with your kids, your teenagers?
I think so.
Yeah.
Right? But I also am not necessarily carrying it for them, right? It's more this carrying with, right? But when somebody gets me, I don't feel like I'm carrying it by myself,
Right.
right?
Right.
I feel like somebody, oh, finally somebody gets me,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's what happens at CR a lot.
Right. Yeah.
People
yeah.
come in and they're afraid and they're like, oh no, people are going to judge me. It's like, oh
Yes.
wait, you.
Oh.
Oh, so other people have the
Yes.
same feeling, and suddenly
I don't stand out.
I don't stand up, but I
yeah.
don't have to carry this alone,
Right.
And maybe I can even let it down.
Yeah.
And put it to the side.
Yeah.
And if I can, if I'm carrying all this burden,
Yeah.
and I can let it down, maybe I can start picking up some other things that are better.
And is that
for me,
really
right?
how a family should function? I mean, what you're saying is kind of how the family should function?
I think so.
Okay.
But like you said,
Yeah.
it doesn't always happen in my house either, because
Right.
I'm human and I have
Right.
thoughts and I have feelings, and
Right.
sometimes I need to prove my point.
Right.
And part of it is going, okay, so what does that gain me? Right? What is really the need here? And who am I really? Right? And not, oh, I should be a good Christian person, so I'm going to do this, this, and this. That's a
Right.
striving part, right? Here's this list of all the things that I'm supposed to do. But it's like, no, well, who am I? Am I an apple tree? And am I Fuji? Am I a Granny Smith? And if I'm that, then this is a thing that I need to do because that's just who I am, right? Not because it's supposed to be, but I do. And part of how I know I'm striving is I do something and I expect you to have a response. If I do this, then you're going to shift, you're going to change, you're going to do something different. And when you don't, you pull my covers because it's a false self, right? When I come and I do what I am towards you, and it doesn't go the way I wanted it to, I still know who I am.
Yeah.
Doesn't shift that.
Right.
I go, wow, that's not exactly what I expected or hoped for, but what's my next step now? Because this is who I am and this is what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
So maybe you're not ready to forgive me. Maybe you're not ready to engage this way. You're not ready
Right.
to hear this and agree. But who am I when I know that this thing doesn't bend me out of shape? Why can't you ever listen? You always try to, right? Because I'm hoping that you're going to change. And if you change, then I feel good about myself. I'm trying to prove myself to you, to me, to God. And living out of truth is improving who I am. I know who I am, and I go, I could probably do this different. I could probably do this better. I'm going to improve who I am, but I know who I am. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Your sole purpose in those moments is not to win, is what I'm hearing.
Right.
It sounds a lot like, when we get, and I can feel it. I'm sure as a parent, you can agree. You feel that like, well up inside you, like, no, that's not right. This is right. Let's get back to right. Cause that's,
and there may be times where we just say, yeah, I get where you thought that. I understand how you feel.
Right.
But we're not going to have drugs in this house.
Right.
We're not going to have people stealing in this house. We're not
Right.
going to have people
Right.
hitting each other
Right.
or pawing or calling
Right.
each other names. So that's still not a thing we're going
Right.
to allow.
Right.
I understand.
Right.
But there's still things that we're not going to allow.
Right.
Right.
Right. So it's healthy understanding your boundaries, understanding your family boundaries, your physical boundaries, but then also leading, because what you're saying in those moments when you say that I hear you, I understand where I see what you're saying here. You're creating an opportunity to bring in, not push out, because in those moments, right, you can feel it kind of happening.
Yeah.
It's a pushing against.
Right.
And so what you're saying, and when we do those words, we have a bringing in of conversation as opposed to shutting it down.
We hope so, right?
Yeah.
And part of it is that we can create a safe space for somebody to come in and they have to decide to.
Yeah, that's
Right.
true.
And so trust is a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
I can do all these things to create trust,
Yeah.
but you have to take the step towards
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And so when I do that with my child, they still have to come in.
Yeah.
Right. And take that step towards
Yeah.
it. And they might not.
Yeah.
But again, it doesn't. If I'm doing that and they're supposed to do that,
Yeah.
right? Well, then I get all bent out of shape. It's
Right.
like I know who I am, so I'm going to continue to create this place of safety.
Right.
I'm going to continue to pray for them. I'm going to continue to invite them here. I'm still
Yeah.
going to encourage them to do this. I'm still not going to allow this thing to happen in my house.
Right.
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 But it's not this thing like you better and you have to and
Strong-arming
and part of it
things.
is I feel guilty as a parent because my kid's making this crazy choice.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's a grade that you're, you're
Right, maybe.
Yeah.
Right, or no kid of mine is going to be whatever,
Yeah,
right? Kind
yeah,
of a thing.
yeah.
And so, Christ always brought people in,
It's a good point.
right?
Yeah.
Even the Pharisees and the Sadducees, he offered them opportunity to look at the truth of where they were, right? You're whitewashed tombs. You're a brood of vipers. You guys
Right.
say this and think this in your heart. Come to the truth, right? He called them to.
Yeah.
And the truth is, it's just like the woman that was caught in adultery. He says, where are those that condemn you? I don't condemn you either. Go and do something different, right? And so it's this drawing in and encouraging our kids, go and do something different,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm not condemning you. And part of grace is knowing grace, right? It goes back to that, what I was saying about worshiping God. When I've had experiences, when I've experienced God's grace, I can offer God's grace differently. When I haven't really experienced it, I struggle giving grace to other people. Well, why should I do that for you? You know, you don't deserve it. But it's like when I know God's love, when I know God's love, right? A deep knowing.
Yeah.
Because I've had this experience with God.
Yeah.
I'm able to give things that I wouldn't normally be able to give, right? And so I wonder sometimes about where we're at as Christian people, that we say, oh, yeah, but we're so stuck in being able to see and offer. And again, it's not agreeing.
Right. Yeah.
Right? But how do we offer love and grace and mercy to others?
I
Right?
love it. Yes.
And so that's a thing to wonder about a little bit. And it's not easy for me either in all places, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you all this, and I'll also have the same struggle.
Right.
Because I'm human.
Right.
Right? But it's a thing that we can be aware of. And it's like, what am I really doing here? Is this really who I am? Right?
Yeah.
And who am I? Have I defined that? Have I created even a list of my values and things that are important to me? Because I go down that list and I go, oh, wow, right? That helps me to go, oh, here's this new job. Does it match? Well, yeah. So it's not horrible, so maybe I do that.
Right.
Or if it's like, no.
It goes against.
Goes against, well, then I just don't do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But half the time we're like, well, maybe, I guess, because right?
Yeah.
And we do that in lots of different
Oh,
areas.
100%. Yeah.
But if I know who I am, oh, hey, come over here and do this thing. Can you be in my banana split? Well, no, I'm an apple. Why would I be in your banana split? Get a banana.
Yeah.
Right? And it just makes sense because I know who I am.
Right.
So, I mean,
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people who have like mission statements for their life.
Right.
You're kind of, that's what,
Right.
very similar to what you're saying. Understanding who you are means understanding what your goal is in life, understanding how God created you and what your purpose will be. You want to accomplish it, right? By the end, whenever that end may be. Well, this is great. This is fantastic stuff. Honestly, the thing that I'm going to take away the most, and really the thing I'm hoping you guys are hearing the most is, man, it starts with us.
Yeah.
That goes on each player in the thing that we're talking about, the kid, the teenager, the parent. It starts with that individual really digging in to understand who God is, how he has made you, and if you are truly giving him your full life, your worship, because out of that comes all of the rest of it. And we are able to hear each other better. We're able to communicate in a healthier way because it's not this selfishness, but it's about this understanding of who we are and how they are and how we all function together in a healthy way. I love it. It's great stuff. We will be putting in any helpful links that we've talked about when we were sitting here talking. And man, Chuck, thank you so much. It's always so helpful to hear this. I wish my guys were younger so that I could really put into practice a lot more of this. But hopefully this was helpful for you as a parent, as a parent of a child, of a teenager, or maybe yours is a little one and they're going to get into these years. We are praying for you. We are encouraging you. Send us your big questions. We want to keep answering them. We think they're really helpful in helping us to grow with each other and from each other. So go and make it a great rest of the week, and we'll see you on Sunday. Bye, guys.